Hello, my name is James Trajari, and I'm the Executive Director at Legal Assistance for Seniors. It is my honor to welcome you to today's program, Recognizing, Preventing, and Addressing Financial Elder Abuse, presented by Kimberly Swierenga and Elena Rowe. This is the third in our series of 4 webinars addressing various topics on elder abuse. As you all probably know, when we hold the conference in person, it takes many dedicated people and agencies coming together to produce such a large function. And this webinar series is no different. First, I would like to thank all of our sponsors who continue to support us through this transition to online education. Their continued dedication and excitement for the work we do is amazing. In particular, I'd like to thank our 4 top sponsors. Michael Stevens, Probate and Trust Realtor, our diamond sponsor. Campbell Green, our platinum sponsor, and our 2 gold sponsors, the Tile Shop and Acuna Wrigley. Michael Stevens has been an incredible support to LAS and is always there to help with enthusiasm. If it involves supporting older adults, Michael is always there with a big yes, and how can I help? Campbell Green has been with LAS long before I came on board. For anything big or small, Phil Campbell is always helping LAS, from emceeing events to guiding the agency by volunteering to be board president. Phil believes in older adults and in LAS. The Tile Shop and Acuna Wrigley, our gold sponsors, have been supporting LAS's work around preventing elder abuse for many years. They are always there to support this work, and we really are so appreciative that they continue to believe in the importance and value of preventing and stopping elder abuse. We have a whole host of sponsors at the silver and bronze levels that we are so incredibly grateful for. Many of these sponsors have been supporting this work for many years. They are our collaborators and our partners, and they keep us excited to continue to do this work. At the silver level, we have Anderson, Yazdi, Wang, Minton, and Horn. Fiduciary Accounting Services, IMT Associates, and Mechanics Bank. At the bronze level, we have 21st Century Care Solutions, ARM Homes, Center for Elders Independence, Evans Law Firm, Farmers Insurance, Golden Gate Fiduciary Services, John Belquist Fiduciary Services, the Law Offices of Sonoy Rousseau, Merlander Company, the Professional Fiduciary Association of California, and Alameda County Supervisor Wilma Chan. In addition, Golden Gate University was going to host the conference in May, and while that did not happen for obvious reasons, they have continued to support LAS in this webinar series with technical support and serving as the honorary event host. The Institute on Aging and their amazing staff continue to be wonderful partners in providing continuing education units for a wide variety of professionals. Last but not least is the team that contributed their time and hard work over the past several months to transition an in-person conference to an online experience. Greg Bedard, Katie Brady, the entire LAS staff, and our event producer, Becca Bloom from BB Events, and Gracie Quinn from Golden Gate University. As I'm sure you're aware, today's presentation is part of a series of 4 webinars LAS is producing in the coming weeks. They are all free of charge and open to the public, though a donation of $25 per webinar will be greatly appreciated and accepted in order to support our ongoing work. We hope you find these presentations informative and useful. You can register for these webinars by visiting our website at lashighcap.org. That's LASHICAP.org, and going to events. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the program.
Good afternoon. My name is Jenny Pardini, and I'm the Community Education Advocate with Legal Assistance for Seniors. I'm delighted to be your moderator. Today you will hear a 45-minute educational presentation from our guest speakers, followed by a Q&A that I will be moderating. If you have any questions for our speakers, please submit them at any point during the program by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom of the meeting screen. If you have any technical issues, you can ask us in the chat, and our technical team will do their best to assist you. All right, let's get to it. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Kimberly Swierenga from Swierenga Law and Mediation and Elena Rowe from the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SF Regional Office, to share their knowledge on financial elder abuse. As principal at Swierenga Law and Mediation, Kimberly helps elders who have been victimized financially by the predatory practices of businesses and others in the financial services industry. She is recognized statewide for her litigation of elder financial abuse claims and improper annuity and life insurance sales. Among others, Kimberly sits on the board of directors for the San Diego County Bar Association and Consumer Attorneys of San Diego, chairs the Elders Law section of the San Diego County Bar Association, and is a court-appointed mediator for the Superior Court and Probate Court in San Diego. I'd also like to introduce Elena Rowe. Elena began working with the SEC's San Francisco Regional Office in 2002 as an enforcement staff attorney and became a regional assistant director in 2014. Elena oversees the operations function as well as supports the SEC's enforcement efforts for Northern California and the Pacific Northwest. Prior to joining the SEC, she worked as a law firm litigation associate in San Francisco and Silicon Valley. Starting our program today will be Kimberly. Welcome to the program, Kimberly.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm pleased to be here today. We have the unique opportunity to be able to learn together. I understand that we have an audience with lawyers and fiduciaries and professional conservators and public guardians. And so today what I'd like to talk about in the first portion of the presentation is financial elder abuse, what it is, who the victims are, and what some civil remedies are that are available to victims of elder abuse. And then my co-presenter, Elena Rowe, will present on what the SEC can do when there's elder abuse, and then specifically some of the scams that are happening during this pandemic and what to keep an eye out on for those. So I'm a private attorney, and I help victims who have been sold products that they don't need. And that tends to be business practices where it's an insurance company, for example, or a solar panel company. But a lot of the cases tend to be people who pretend to be financial planners, but indeed are just masqueraded insurance agents. And so they're going to sell these highly commissioned products, annuities, for example, or life insurance to elders. And they'll use the guise of financial planning, or they'll say that they're creating a trust for an elder, and oftentimes it's not an attorney that is creating that trust, but instead that's kind of used as the pretext to get them in the door to be able to sell their services and products to elders. And so here we are with a group of people who hold the majority of the money, who tend to be isolated more than younger people in the community, and who look to others for advice on where to spend their money and how to make sure that they've got assets such that they can live for the remainder of their days adequately. And what we're finding is that a lot of people are exploiting the elders because they've got money. I'm not saying that an elder being sold a product is a problem. What I am saying is fraudulent business practices and unfair business practices is a problem, and it's a tremendously huge problem. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about types of financial exploitation, how you can identify some of these frauds and scams, and then who can help that elder or the elder herself or himself pursue remedies when there's been a problem. So on the screen is the code section that allows heightened protections to elders. And an elder is anybody who is 65 years or older. So if you have 65 candles on your birthday cake, you are a VIP in the state of California. And similarly, if you are what's considered a dependent adult is somebody between 18 and 64 years old who has physical or mental limitations that restrict her ability to carry out her normal activities or to protect her own rights. And so with these special protections, what the law does is allows for extra precautions to be taken so that when an elder is sold something they don't need or something is taken from the elder, that elder can demand return of it. If it's a product that's, you've heard the term perhaps buyer beware. With 65 plus year olds, when I say elder, incorporate in that dependent adult also a protected class under the same statute. Instead of buyer beware, it flips that on its head and it becomes seller beware. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. But with elders can have representatives, just like any age person can. But representatives, what you might be familiar with, are conservators and trustees or powers of attorney, also known as attorneys in fact. And these are all individuals who would be able to help an elder pursue civil remedies. And when I say civil remedies, I merely mean money damages. And so when you're in civil court, all you can do is pursue money damages. And so you have on the screen here a summary of what the definition of elder abuse is. And so the word abuse is, of course, a very strong word, but the first subpart there is what I really like to use in my practice, where the defendant, the bad guy, the bad gal, takes secrets, appropriates, obtains, or retains real or personal property of an elder or dependent adult for a wrongful use or with intent to defraud, or both. And then let's talk a minute about what a wrongful use is, because that's a defined term. Wrongful use is merely that seller beware. If they know or should know it's likely harmful to the elder, they know or they should know it's likely harmful to the elder, that's a taking for a wrongful use. And then that salesperson could be liable for elder abuse. Now, I'm looking at this in the business sense. Elder abuse happens all the time within families and with caretakers and with non-strangers, if you will, also. My expertise happens to be with those business entities. And so I'm just biased. But when I say defendant, it could very well be the next door neighbor. It could be the caretaker who has become the best friend. It could be a new person in that elder's life. So then back to the summary of what elder abuse is somebody can be liable if they assist in the taking, secreting, appropriating, obtaining, or retaining property of an elder. And then the third way to show it is by undue influence, taking the property by undue influence, which itself is a defined term, and then you can show whether something indeed was taken by undue influence. So I won't spend too much time on this slide, but you're welcome to take a look at that as to what elder abuse is versus when I say domestic elder abuse or non-stranger elder abuse, that tends to be those family members and caregivers, acquaintances, and then commercial financial elder abuse, which I spoke of moments ago. So I alluded earlier to this know or should know standard. And so what that is just this negligence standard where you don't, the word fraud makes it sound like there's got to be a real bad intent in there. But that's not what elder abuse is in the civil matters. What it is when they should have known better. And so that negligence standard is what allows elders to be able to then pursue the exploiters. They should have known better. It doesn't have anything to do with intent. Here are a couple varieties of elder abuse. There's physical elder abuse that has its own statute and its own standards that you pursue with physical elder abuse claims. Emotional elder abuse, sexual abuse, neglect. Now, neglect of an elder falls beneath the physical abuse statute. And then, of course, today's topic, financial elder abuse. So here's a list of folks to keep an eye out for, because exploitation can happen from anyone. And it's not just those typical con artists or grandma scams that you hear so much about. There's been a tremendous amount of legislative attention to this issue because it's a growing population, because it is such a huge problem. And oftentimes what we find is it's the generation that is so embarrassed and feel betrayed, but so embarrassed to come forward. And of course, the legislation is based around recognizing it's an age-related vulnerability. That's why this group deserves to have these extra statutory protections. Every single one of us is going to become vulnerable. If we're not already, every single one of us will suffer cognitive decline. And so studies show that people have self-confidence in their own financial decision-making. And in fact, that confidence grows with age, but statistically, their they're worse off. The aging brain itself is what creates that phenomenon. And so there's nothing to be embarrassed about. The abusers are recognizing this cognitive impairment that happens to every single one of us is what they often prey upon. And here's what they exploit. They exploit about the elders' worries about financial independence. They exploit concerns about liquidity or easy access to money. They exploit the idea that the elder might lose the ability to make her own decisions for fear that perhaps somebody finds out something went wrong and needs help, and she doesn't want to lose her independence. We talked a little bit earlier, they fight that loneliness and isolation that we all of course can be prey to, but tend to be more so in our older years. Depression and medicine cycles and chronic illnesses and physical impairments. And that's why the legislation recognizes the state of California has a duty to protect, let me not use the word duty, but incentivizes elders to come forward to bring their cases when they've been wronged. So here are some of the exploited impairments. The aging brain tends to have memory loss. It's slower to process information. We all have impaired judgment when we're excited. And some of us have some obsessions and compulsive behavior. So what do they do to be able to exploit elders? Well, elders with checkbooks, with credit cards, with bank accounts. Defendants might have stolen money, checks, household goods, or other property. They might forge an elder's signature. So often I see home titles that have forged signatures where somebody's trying to take an early inheritance, for example. Elder abuse can be stealing the identity of an elder. I have a lot of 80 and 90-year-olds who don't have computers, much less an email account, but somebody will impersonate that elder, sign on to online accounts, and then use that elder's identity to purchase whatever it is that person wants. This is a big one, abusing a financial power of attorney. And then anytime that somebody is taking the property of an elder where they should know it's likely harmful to the elder, they can be liable for elder abuse. Switching gears on you a little bit. So I like to call these paper weapons. And paper weapons like powers of attorney, front and center, that is the keys to the kingdom. That is where an elder will give the rights to another individual to either share the powers that she has already or at a future date, only if something bad happens to the elder or the elder becomes incapacitated or loses her capacity, you might have heard it that way, do those powers become effective. But those powers of attorney are very powerful and so often do get abused. Credit with wills, with trusts, marriage licenses, deeds, notarized documents, insurance policies, all of these can be used as paper weapons against the elder. And so what we see with elders, they're repeat victims, and they're what's known as super victims. They tend to be the older of the old. It's rare that they'll come forward for the reasons mentioned, and they often get themselves in so deep that they figure, well, I'm already this far in. I might as well just keep going. And an example was there was a woman who called and said, I knew that the bad guy on the phone telling me to send him more money was a fraudster, but it was the only person who would call me on the phone. And I think that is unfortunately not the exception to the rule. So we've got these super victims where they've got tremendous losses, substantial monetary losses. They're repeat victims. They might be looking for a way to, they receive something that looks official. And they might be looking for a way to confirm in their mind, oh, I really have won a lottery, or I really have been specially selected. But I tell you, you know, the only people who want the elders' names, for example, well, disregard that thought. But what we have here is very official looking documents, cashier's checks, sweepstake winners, any kind of prize, award announcements. We've all heard this term, no such thing as a free lunch. So this is an actual flyer that nonprofit is baloney, that they call themselves nonprofit, but it's a group of professionals that do all these lunch seminars at a Mimi's Cafe, for example, and they send this flyer out in the newspapers throughout the state of California, and then they give a sales pitch, essentially, that the elders don't realize is a sales pitch. They talk about MEDICATE planning, or Veterans Aid and Attendance Benefit planning. And it's really just a pretextual interview. Get the contact information of the elder. And then the salesperson, who tends to be an insurance salesperson, will then go to the elder's home and sell some kind of product, all under the guise of government benefit planning. And so this was an instance in that particular company where it's like playing whack-a-mole. They know it's a well-oiled machine they have. They have CPAs and insurance salespeople and lawyers. The lawyers produce the trusts. The CPAs are doing taxes, for example. The insurance salesman is doing or salesperson is doing the life insurance and annuity sales to them. And they're paying a finder's fee to that nonprofit. And so they get sued via class action because they take advantage of lots of people, and then they change their name and continue to do the bad practices even after they've been enjoined from doing so. So here are some indicators of financial abuse. The elders attended a free seminar. The elder doesn't have an understanding of the product that she purchased. The elder has a trust which isn't funded. Or the elders recently purchased a reverse mortgage. Or the elders paid a non-attorney to help plan their retirement. And so here are some of those warning signs you can look for, that claims seem to be from an expert. There's a free meal offered, that there's an offer to update an estate plan. There's a claim that existing investments are deficient or inadequate. There's an offer that some kind of annuity will help the elder qualify for something else. Or that they'll try and the salesperson will try and reposition a veteran's assets to help qualify for veterans benefits. And so here's some of the things that are done to help the defendants exploit the elder. So they're going to unwind estate planning. They might take property out of a trust to make it reachable. They'll put the sense of hurry into the elder. You have to do this, you have to do this now. It's a limited time offer kind of thing. There will be radical changes, for example, to beneficiaries. Perhaps the elder has newly executed a durable power of attorney or has put the trust in a new name. It could be that the elder is now being isolated more from family and friends, if the elder still has family and friends around. It could be that there's a bank account that's opened with a new boyfriend or girlfriend. Or it could just merely be a red flag, the unearned trust in someone new. Here's where we have an opportunity. Ask that elder why. Ask your parents, ask your grandparents, ask your neighbors. Have them explain what's going on so that you can at least try and help them avoid harm's way. I'm going to skip some of the war stories, but here was a company that would canvass neighborhoods, put the fear of God into elders about outliving their assets, and then offer them everything they needed, and just for a mere $10,000, I'll help you qualify for Medi-Cal come time for you to go into a care facility. And so that individual remains effective at that, and I'll sue him again, and then I'll have to sue him again, and one of those well-oiled machines. Here was another instance where it was a reverse mortgage company, and it was a law firm. And so what they would do is they would have the elder who was in distress with their real estate sign up essentially for a subscription fee, a monthly cost, with the promise that they were going to help renegotiate the reverse mortgage. And of course that never happened. And they promised that we've got all the right kind of people, all the right experts. And so right before this company went bankrupt, the FTC also sued them. And so we were able to get our elders their money back. Here are some more things just to be aware of. I was mentioning that group that calls themselves a nonprofit, that they go out and use pretextual interviews. What they provided was literally a go kit where these professionals would pay 10% of their finder's fee or the proceeds for whatever it is that they could have sold, the trust or that life insurance or the annuity. And the U.S. Senior Vet Volunteer Advocates, what they go by, was provided this booklet and all the forms. And so they would just plug in their name, Kimberly Swierenga, instead of Joe Advocate there, for example, and make it look very official. Here is what a caption looks like in civil court. And so here is one of the cases that I filed, and I brought the cause of action, financial elder abuse. I brought with this one also negligent infliction of emotional distress, breach of fiduciary duty, aiding and abetting breach of fiduciary duty. And then these two unique causes of action that are also helpful in California: Consumer Legal Remedies Act violation. And so in this PowerPoint are the code sections that you can read up on what that is, but it provides very good protections for every consumer regardless of age. But I like to couple that with my elder abuse claims. And then this unfair, unlawful, and deceptive business practice, a 17-200 claim. And that's where we can stop bad practices. I'm going to let you just take a look at that slide. Some of these are seemingly common sense, but please just educate the elders in your life and in your network. These are things that to avoid. Don't sign blank checks. Don't sign documents that you don't understand. Get copies of every page that you've signed. Don't let strangers come into your home without somebody else being there. Don't pay cash. Get a receipt. Just cancel. If there's when in doubt, don't. I like that motto. I've heard that before. So here's the next couple slides are some terms that have to do with, well, securities, for example. And Elena might be able to talk about some of those later, but this is a problem when there's twisting and churning. An annuity is just a very expensive contract between an insurance company and an elder, and there's a lot of statutory protections for elders with that too, some of which are in these next slides. How long does an elder have to do something about financial exploitation? 4 years. 4 years from the date of discovery. And it can be brought by that elder, it can be brought by a representative of the elder, and it can even be brought by a successor in interest. So an elder financial abuse claim survives death. I'm going to say that again. A financial abuse claim survives death. So even after the elder has passed, a lawsuit can still be brought to recover the damages from the financial exploiter. And so from the date of discovery, and it's reasonable diligence, you should have discovered the harm. It's 4 years' time. And I'll skip what the civil litigation process is, but it's merely this. You file the lawsuit, you get into discovery, you ask questions on paper, you take depositions to get testimony, and then you're off to the races. Some cases, very few, but some cases go to a trial, and the majority of things settle short of that. Here's some folks who have standing. You'll find people who have standing to bring a claim at Welfare and Institution Code section 1610.30. It should say 15610.30, little typo there. Another example of what a caption looked like on a pleading. This was a woman who I sued Bank of America because Bank of America transferred away to the tune of almost $800,000. And Rosemary thought she had won the lottery. Never mind, she never bought a ticket. But over 17 wire transfers wired away money, and I held the bank accountable for their assistance of that elder abuse. Just another example of a caption that might be helpful for the lawyers in the audience, the different causes of action. And then probate court is separate and aside from civil court. And so I've just got a couple little slides in there to talk about what the difference is. And an elder can bring the claim in either, but in civil court is where you get your jury. Here's a caption for what probate court looks like. And then again, some of the differences. So we talked about what it looks like after. Some of these remedies are specifically delineated in these code sections. So I'll let you review your materials to see that. But the bottom line is this, is that the remedies are good and attorney's fees are mandatory unilaterally, one way to the attorney. And so even if the plaintiff doesn't prove her case, for example, and the defense wins, there is no attorney's fees that would be paid to the defense side. That's huge. And that is an unwaivable right. And so that's incentivizing private attorneys to take the civil matters so that when an elder has no more money because it's all been taken, then you can still have an attorney. Here's a list of even more remedies. And so I'll let you take a look over that. And importantly, with somebody who is over the age of 70, they can request trial preference. So pre-pandemic days, that would have meant trial within 120 days. Candidly, I don't know what that looks like anymore these days. But I hope the impression that you're getting from this is that elders really are VIPs in the state of California, and lawyers are incentivized to take those civil cases and help that elder get all of her stolen money and property back. So a couple potential defendants, some common defenses that you'll hear. Proper planning can help, education can help, just like we're doing today. Just the awareness alone is helpful. And so I'm going to turn over the presentation now to my co-presenter, and she's going to help us understand a bit about what the SEC is doing to help our elders who have been exploited.
Thank you to Legal Assistance for Seniors, to Katie Brady, and to my co-panelist, Kim Swierenga, for inviting me to speak with you today and for sharing this important stage. My name is Elena Rowe, and I'm an Assistant Regional Director for Operations in the SEC San Francisco Regional Office. Today, I will be presenting mainly on protecting against COVID-19 investment scams. Next slide, please. I'm required to give this disclaimer before I share more with you. We are not providing legal advice or investment advice today. Instead, I'm talking about general principles of sound investing and avoiding fraud. In addition, the views I express today are my own and do not necessarily reflect those of the Commission, the commissioners, or other members of the Commission staff. Next slide, please. Kim already covered some of the topics that are contained in my slide, so I will focus heavily on coronavirus COVID-19 scams that have been popping up recently, as well as SEC resources available to you. Next slide, please. One of the SEC's primary functions is to protect US investors, including our nation's seniors. We do this in many ways, including enforcing the law against securities fraud and educating investors through events like this one. Lately, there have been many promotions of investments in companies fraudulently touting COVID-19 cures, treatments, medical equipment, and related scams. In late March of 2020, the SEC's Division of Enforcement formed a coronavirus steering committee to coordinate our response to coronavirus-related enforcement issues. One enforcement tool is that the SEC can suspend trading in stock if, in its opinion, the public interest and the protection of investors so require. Next slide, please. Seniors are often the target of investment fraud. Recognizing the red flags of fraud can help you avoid becoming a victim. Watch out for these red flags. For the last bullet, you can look up whether a salesperson is registered with the SEC. You want to make sure any investment professional you use is licensed or registered. This is very easy to do. Just go to investor.gov, which is an SEC website, and it will walk you through how to look up if your salesperson is licensed or registered. There'll be more slides on this in a little bit. Next slide, please. Unsolicited offers to invest that can come out of the blue, for example, through a cold call, an email, direct mail, or social media is a red flag. Be cautious of claims that a company, for example, can help cure the coronavirus or is converting business to COVID-19 related support. Be very careful. You don't even need to respond. If you're tempted by the offer, do your homework, or better yet, just walk away. Next slide, please. Investment fraudsters use persuasion tactics that feed on your emotions, and this is especially true in the current environment of the coronavirus. To combat COVID-19 frauds, the SEC's Enforcement Division has suspended trading in approximately 35 companies so far that had questionable claims of products or services related to coronavirus prevention, testing for cures, and has been brought fraud charges against a number of companies. For example, questionable claims, including touting finger stick tests for use at home, ready for immediate deployment, thermal scanning equipment to check for fevers, and having large supplies of N95 masks are all red flags we should be looking out for. Watch out for the allure of microcap stocks and promises of the next big thing. There are a lot of articles about people rushing into the market to trade. It is faster and cheaper to trade now than ever before, but don't forget to do your homework first. Next slide, please. Scam artists often use the latest news developments, including national crises and periods of uncertainty, to lure investors into scams. Lately, some scammers are using COVID-19 to promote bogus investments. Next slide, please. Watch out for stock promotions that look like research reports and predict a company's stock price will hit a certain target price. A hallmark false claim may be that the company is converting operations to benefit from the COVID crisis. Next slide, please. One common investment scheme is called a pump and dump, a type of fraud that typically involves the cheapest of stocks, penny or microcap stocks. These companies typically have no earnings, assets, or business operations. Often promoters will hype or pump a stock to attract investors, and as investors buy the stock price goes up. That's when the promoters sell or dump their shares. When the promoters dump their shares, the share price plummets and most investors are left with worthless stock. For example, in June of this year, our office charged a penny stock trader in Santa Cruz with conducting a financial fraudulent pump and dump scheme in the stock of a biotechnology company. We allege that the defendant made hundreds of misleading statements in an online investment forum, including a false assertion that the company had developed an approved COVID-19 blood test. We allege that the defendant attempted to drive the stock price up of the company, Array Corporation, and its securities higher using online posts encouraging investors to purchase shares, including numerous messages repeating the false assertion regarding an approved COVID-19 test without telling them about his large positions in Array stock or his plans to sell the shares while others were buying. Next slide, please. The SEC is actively monitoring our markets for fraud, illicit schemes, and other misconduct affecting U.S. investors relating to COVID-19. The SEC has suspended trading in multiple companies that had questionable claims of products or services related to coronavirus prevention, testing, or cures. Be sure to research any company before investing, and we'll show you how to find a tool to do such research towards the end of our presentation. Next slide, please. Many organizations currently offer opportunities to help those most affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Fraudsters, however, may try to exploit your desire to help others by using charitable causes as a hook for investment schemes. For example, they may pretend that your investment will provide financial support or medical treatment to people in need as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and then steal your money instead. Next slide, please. During periods of market volatility, many investors may seek investments they feel are safer and less subject to risk and price fluctuations, such as financial products with fixed rate returns. We are aware of current fraudulent promotions of phony certificates of deposit, or CDs, through internet advertising and spoofed websites that mimic the actual sites of legitimate financial institutions. Spoof websites may use URL addresses similar to those of legitimate firms' websites, or use legitimate sounding names and URLs. Spoof websites selling fake CDs may offer high interest rates with no penalties for early withdrawals, promote only CDs and no other financial products, require high minimum deposits, direct investors to wire funds abroad or to an account with a different name than the listed financial institution, claim the deposits are FDIC insured, and identify clearing partners purportedly registered with the SEC. Next slide, please. I'm going to go quickly through some other common investment scams, not necessarily specific to COVID-19. Next slide, please. A Ponzi scheme may look at first glance like a legitimate investment, but many of these scams promise unrealistically high or consistent returns. The scammers may be using money from new investors to pay promised returns to early investors, and may or may not be investing anything in an actual venture. Next slide, please. Ever been told you won a contest or a lottery, but you just have to pay the taxes beforehand? This is an example of an advance fee fraud, where the scam artist tries to convince you to make some payment, whether it's a tax, a fee, a commission, or some incidental expense before you can get your winnings. Next slide, please. Fraudsters posing as SEC or other governmental agency employees may call potential victims on the telephone and request detailed personal and financial information, such as your shareholdings and your PIN numbers. SEC staff do not make those types of unsolicited communications. Next slide, please. One type of fraud is especially vexing because it's when the seller has a connection to us or a basis for some level of trust. We call it affinity fraud or community-based fraud, and it's where a member of your same cultural, racial, ethnic, or religious community seeks you out, hoping to use the affinity with you as a way to scam you. You should always research the investment and investment professional, even if they live in your neighborhood or go to your church, for example. Next slide, please. There are many steps you can take to protect yourself financially. Let me just pause here and also add that the SEC's examination program has also been implementing the SEC's priority on protecting seniors in two ways, through risk-based exams and a recent national initiative focused on investment advisors that had a significant exposure to senior clients, the so-called Senior Focus Initiative. Under these initiatives, our examination staff review how broker-dealers interact with senior investors, including their ability to identify financial exploitation of seniors. We also review services and products offered to seniors and those saving for retirement when examining investment advisors. Next slide, please. So please check out our website. It's at investor.gov. Next slide, please. On that website, you'll find a tool to see if an investment professional you're interested in working with is licensed or registered. Next slide, please. In addition to registration, you can also look up disclosures of any complaints related to that investment professional. Next slide, please. The tool provides a full report. Next slide, please. And you should read up on all the disclosure events in that report, which could include customer disputes, employment separations, and other information you might find important. Next slide, please. Our website also leads you to our Edgar tool. Next slide, please. On Edgar, you can research public companies, including investment products they offer. Next slide, please. Remember, protect yourself from financial fraud. Next slide, please. Follow all of these precautions. Next slide, please. As the other ways that you can protect yourself. Next slide, please. And here are some additional slides on other SEC resources. Next slide, please. Okay. Again, here's our investor.gov website and what it looks like. Next slide, please. The website has checklists you can review to educate yourself when investing. Next slide, please. As well as many investor alerts and bulletins of how to avoid financial fraud. Next slide, please. And you can also make your own complaint or report a suspected fraud on our website, which may protect the next investor as well as yourself. Next slide, please. And finally, you can also call or email us if you need investor assistance. Thank you again for having us here today. We now look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Kimberly and Elena, for those amazing presentations. It's incredible how many scams exist and how quickly they change to stay ahead of those of us working to educate older adults on how to avoid fraud. Our audience has many questions, which we'll hope to get answered in our Q&A. We have 20 minutes set aside, so for anything we don't get answered today, we will follow up with guests after the presentation. As a reminder, if you have any questions, please submit them into the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. And in order to see all of us on screen, click on Speaker View in the top right corner of your screen. Let's bring Kimberly and Elena back and get started. Hello. All right, let's go to our first question. So the attendee says, I help an older long-term low-income neighbor, including paying bills and managing finances. I have power of attorney, and we have added myself to her bank account to make things easier to make deposits. What can I do to protect myself from claims of financial elder abuse?
I guess I'll take this one. Well, I don't want to give case-specific advice where we fall into attorney-client relationship, but just generally to ensure that somebody is not liable for or exposing herself to liability for elder abuse. Keep track of why you're doing the things that you're doing. If you're doing the financial records on behalf of the elder, keep very good records of that. That would be one way to show later that there's no malfeasance. Just really being transparent, of course, will be helpful. And so you heard me mention in the recorded presentation that it's seller beware, essentially, instead of that buyer beware. So because it is such a seemingly simple thing to be exposed to liability, as a power of attorney, you are a fiduciary, meaning you're putting the interest of that person ahead of your own. And so if you're walking the straight and narrow with that and you're being transparent, those are good practices.
Great, thank you. Often when a trust is involved in a statutory financial elder abuse claim, for example, the defendant was a trustee of the plaintiff's trust, the defendant may argue that probate court has exclusive jurisdiction over matters concerning trusts. Is there a good rebuttal to this, or should these cases be filed in the probate department?
Probate's not it's outside my wheelhouse. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer.
Same here.
Okay, so we will try to get an answer to that and get back to the person who asked it at a later time. Some things aren't necessarily abusive. So this person is saying there are some free seminars that reverse mortgages can be useful to some people. How do we help separate the good from the bad?
Elena, do you have thoughts on this?
Well, there's a common theme in my materials that at the end of the day, just what we're really urging you to do, I think, is to do your own research. So we're not saying every seminar is bad that someone goes to, or every company that is working on a vaccine right now is necessarily fraudulent. But what we are urging you to do is to do your research. So if you do go to a seminar, take down the information. Don't sign up for something on behalf of yourself or an elder right at that moment. Go home, think about it. As Kimberly said in her presentation, go talk to friends, family, advisors, anyone that can kind of look over the materials that you got and give you their thoughts on, oh yeah, this does look legitimate, or no, I would maybe hold off on getting involved in this particular thing. So bottom line, do your research, never jump into something right away.
Thank you. This one is, how often do plaintiffs actually get financially made whole when they win their case?
Is the defendant, well, I guess the first question before you even take the case is, can you collect on any judgment that you might get? And so that's one of the variables that the lawyers will look at is, can they collect that money? But this question was a little different. How many get the money once the elder has been defrauded and proven her case? I can only speak for my experience. It's been successful each time, but that's because we're very selective with the cases for that very reason, to make sure we can bring that value back to the victim.
Thank you. Is there a list of companies involved in fraudulent stock sales on the SEC website? If so, could you provide a link or online resource?
Yeah, so if you, I talked a lot today about investor.gov, which is an SEC website. You can also go to sec.gov. It is a SEC website. It's our website. And if you go there on top, there'll be a couple of links that take you to all of our enforcement actions and administrative proceedings. And from there, it's separated out by year. So year by year, it lists out every single person or company that we sued. And you could look there to see if there's something interesting to you that you want to learn more about. If it's a particular broker or investment advisor that you're interested in learning more about, especially if an action has ever been brought against him or her, the easiest way really is to go to FINRA's website, FINRA, and do a search in their tool called Broker Check. It's super easy. All you do is type in the broker's name or the investment advisor's name, and any disclosure that's ever been made about that individual will pop up. So if the person has ever been sued or in his or her professional capacity or customer complaints, that will all show up there. And then that's one of your due diligence tools in figuring out if you feel safe working with this particular individual.
Thank you. One of our participants asks, I have many elders who ask about making changes to their irrevocable trust. Are there options for them?
That's a lawyer for a trust, or that's a question I think for a trust lawyer.
Okay, so we will save that question and try and get back to that person who asked it. And then we have, how do you double check that the official license number given by the person or company is not being used fraudulently? Are there ways to confirm identities?
Again, the best way, if the person you're working with is saying they're a broker or an investment advisor, is to go to FINRA's Broker Check tool on their website. Super easy to use. If they are licensed, they should show up on there. If you have their license number and you put it in and someone else pops up, that's definitely a red flag. So I would look more into that. But that's really the easiest tool to use.
Well, I have some thoughts on that too, is with contractors, for example, with home builders, oftentimes I'll see where one license number is used for various people. And so if somebody is practicing law, for example, and they say, well, I'm practicing under Kimberly Swierenga's license, that's a no-no. Only I can practice with my law license. With contractors' licenses, you'll often have subcontractors you'll find that are using then that somebody else's. I don't know what the answer would be to find out if that is the person who he represents himself to be, for example. But with the securities and investment stuff, Broker Check is a fantastic resource. With things that aren't investments but are still regulated activities with licenses, every kind of license has an administrative body that regulates those licenses. And so a quick call to them could be fruitful.
Thank you. Let's see. Do you encourage the victims to file police reports with local authorities so that the perpetrator can be prosecuted?
It doesn't so much matter with the civil case whether there is a police report. In the cases I tend to take, the documents prove the case, essentially. And so whether a police report was ever given or that the cops get involved or prosecutors get involved matters not for the civil part of it. But if there have been police records and there have been some, and there's criminal, now financial elder abuse, for example, is also criminal. And so I do have a current case right now, in fact, where the prosecutors are starting their investigations. I wanted to get far enough in the civil matter. All I can do is pursue money, and money is considered civil justice. Whereas the prosecutor, of course, can take liberties, take somebody's liberties, put somebody in jail, and also get restitution. So bottom line is, yes, you can do both. If they want to file a police report, that's their choice.
Thank you. Do you have any suggestions what a financial advisor ought to do if they observe manipulative or self-serving family members taking advantage or gearing up to take advantage of an elder financially? You want me to read it again?
Well, if I understood that correctly, what can the financial advisor do when he's seen, when he or she's seen potentially abusive family members?
Yes.
You can report. You have the choice. That financial planner has the choice to report that suspected elder abuse. Now there's, I think, a little confusion about when Adult Protective Services gets involved and how they're able to help, and the limitations that they have on what they're able to do for a victim separately from any other administrative or civil actions. That advisor, if he has concerns, can certainly put in a report.
Great, thank you. And we still have a lot of questions coming in. So I know we're working on getting all of those together. I'm gonna go, Elena, is it safe to invest in a company that's working on creating a coronavirus vaccine?
Right, so, separate from whether it's working on a vaccine or not working on a vaccine, if you open up the news today, we see lots of companies who are legitimate that are working on vaccines. My biggest message to the audience is do your research. Okay, so if the company is calling you up out of the blue on the phone saying, hey, we're making this great vaccine, it's going to be quite successful, invest in us. That's a red flag that they're reaching out to you to invest. Politely over the phone, or if it's in person, take the information down that you want, but then hang up and then go do your own research and make sure it's a legitimate company. Again, you can go to investor.gov on our SEC website, and we have an Edgar tool where you can research public companies, look on there and see if you can get information that kind of validates that it is a legitimate company working on a vaccine right now. But at the end of the day, the best thing you can do is to do your own research before investing in any company, regardless of whether they're working on a vaccine or not.
In prior conversations, Elena, I think it was you who said it nicely, where it was the company's not going to call you to ask you to invest. It ought to be the other way around. The consumer needs to be the one to reach out.
Yeah, it's a totally different story if you're inspired yourself to do more research into a company that didn't solicit you first, and you learn more about the company and you feel that it is trustworthy. That's a much better way to go than to react to someone who's looking for you, wanting your money. That's a red flag.
Thank you. And probably similarly related, someone saying, my phone is ringing off the hook asking me to donate to charities. How do I know if a charity is legitimate?
So again, do your research. Red flag, the charity or the alleged charity is calling you or approaching you. Politely take down the information, but then walk away, do your own research. There are a lot of tools on the internet easily available to figure out if a charity is valid or not. You could go to your state's Better Business Bureau website and look up the company or the charity and see if there have been any complaints made by consumers against that company or charity. There, if you just Google charity validation in the internet, there are a number of websites and companies dedicated to tracking and following charities and making sure that they're legitimate. And the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, has their own website. They're a federal agency to protect consumers. And they have tools on their website to look up or how to look up whether a charity is valid or not. So definitely do your own research and use those tools that are readily available to you.
Thank you. All right, so at what point does it make sense financially to bring a suit against a party? If the amount at issue is $1,000, is it worth it given attorney's fees and other expenses? How does one make such a determination?
Well, I'll take a stab at that. So that's going to be a very fact-specific and very personal decision based on the plaintiff. And so the person doing the suing, you don't want to throw good money after bad, of course. There's common sense that's involved in this too. So civil lawsuits are very expensive to prosecute. It requires hiring experts. There are filing fees, for example. And so it'll be a personal decision about whether it's worth pursuing $1,000. For an example, it's $435 to file a civil lawsuit right out of the gate.
Okay. I think that answers that pretty well. And I'm going to ask you another one here, Kimberly. In regards to the lunch presentations that are used to access personal information, have you heard of any ways that the scammers have modified their practices since shelter in place began?
I haven't, but I wouldn't be surprised to hear that it still happens. What I had seen before, pre-pandemic, is that flyers would be sent out in the mail and inviting consumers to these free lunch seminars. What I personally am experiencing is right on my own cell phone is people are asking me to click on this link or check this out. I don't know what happens next with that, but I also receive a lot of auto robot calls that are asking me to do something or telling me my social security has been, something's wrong with it, or the IRS is after me, and all these just fraudulent things.
Okay, good, thank you. And when someone says it's a civil matter, what does that mean?
Yeah, so a civil matter is just being able to pursue financial remedies. And so it means it's brought in a superior court, which is a trial court, for example, or probate court, as somebody mentioned. And so it's not a case where you're going to be able to put the bad actor in jail. It's not an instance where you're going to be able to get their license taken away from them. And so a civil suit it's a fight for damages, for money. And when I say damages, that equates to money.
And how long does it take for a civil suit to be prosecuted? No, the question is, if a civil suit is filed, I'm reading two questions. So how long does a civil suit take to be resolved? That was the way that was phrased.
Yeah, assuming that it's a typical run-of-the-mill case, it takes a couple years. It does take a couple years. Now, you do have the opportunity to request trial preference if it's a 70-plus-year-old victim, and they tend to have the judges. First of all, it's an option. Whether the judge will grant it is to be seen. But if the 70-plus-year-old is in ill health, then they might be able to get trial preference, in which case trial is going to happen in 4 months. This is pre-COVID information. Right now, I'm getting trial dates that are in June of 2021 and farther, but those are hocus pocus dates. Who knows if they'll happen? And the important thing about civil cases, when you have a trial date, that's what motivates the defendants to talk about settlement, because otherwise there's no incentive to pay the plaintiff.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Elena, and I'm going to jump to you with this one. Can the SEC put people in jail?
So the securities laws prohibit fraudulent conduct, both criminally and civilly. But the SEC is responsible only on the civil side to bring civil enforcement actions or administrative proceedings. So when it's civil, that means no, we cannot put anyone in jail. But from time to time during our investigations, there could be an independent parallel criminal investigation as well, conducted by the Department of Justice or the U.S. Attorney's Office. And in that instance, the criminal counterpart would decide independently on their own if they feel a criminal action should be brought against the company or individual, and then they would have criminal remedies, including being able to put someone in jail.
How does that?
I think Elena just made an important point too, is that when there's a criminal prosecution, it's now the state. The state is essentially the plaintiff. It's not the victim. And so it's the state that determines whether they're going to criminally prosecute.
Okay, and I was just going to ask also, Elena, how does the SEC decide which cases to take?
So we get cases a lot of different ways, or let me say we get complaints, tips, and referrals a lot of different ways. The public often comes to us and complains about some kind of conduct, or other state and federal agencies will come to us and refer over something, or even sometimes companies will self-report things that they found internally. So we take all of those complaints, tips, and referrals, and then we have to decide whether to open up an investigation because we've determined there is a potential violation of the securities law. So that's number one. We have to have jurisdiction, or believe there's a good likelihood we have jurisdiction. And that means that there's a potential violations of the securities laws. And then we also have to determine if it's a good use of agency resources to continue with that investigation. So when we go through that analysis, the factors that we often think about is how egregious is the conduct, how old is the conduct, are we going to run into a statute of limitations issue, what are the potential losses, are they huge, what types of investors are potentially being damaged at the moment, and is the conduct ongoing? Is it something that happened once 20 years ago, or is it happening right now and the SEC needs to take action right away? So those are all the factors we take into account in trying to determine which cases we'll keep on going with and which we would close down.
Thank you. Regarding incentivizing attorneys to take plaintiff's case, if the defense wins, is the plaintiff required to pay all attorney fees or other expenses?
No.
Okay. And then as a follow-up to that, I'm going to go ahead and ask, what kind of involvement is required of a plaintiff if they file a lawsuit?
Okay, so if a plaintiff files a lawsuit, then the lawyer is going to need help with gathering documents, with gathering witness statements and knowing who, pointing the lawyer in the right direction for who would have additional information that would be helpful in the prosecution. I keep using the word prosecution, it's a criminal term for that, but same idea with civil cases. The plaintiff will need to appear for depositions and give testimony. Oftentimes the plaintiff will sign declarations attesting to certain facts that will be supporting in different motions that might happen throughout the lawsuit. So it'll be a regular, constant communication with that lawyer throughout the pendency of the case.
Okay, thank you. And what factors are considered by attorneys to determine if they will take a case?
Whether there's money to collect, if that plaintiff can be made whole, importantly. And then next is, so for me, it's important that it really puts fire in my belly, because I'm just going to take a handful of cases at a time, and I'd like to make an impact where I can. And so if I can change a business practice and change way, I have no problem with people making money. I just want them to make money fairly. And so if we have sales agents who are not doing fair sales, for example, I noticed in the comment section, somebody mentioned real estate agents. There's a tremendous amount of abuse that happens there, where they offer a lower price than the elder could otherwise get on the home. They flip the house, they sell it to their own people or to their own company or colleagues and whatnot, but they're making double and triple commissions on that. So that's one way. But the short answer is to make sure you can collect and make whole that plaintiff.
Thank you. And someone asked, how can we truly know of potential abuse? I think that's in regard to when we were talking about the question of if someone suspected that there could be potential abuse and reporting. But this one is just more addressing, like, how would they maybe identify what potential abuse looks like?
Well, if I'm interpreting it correctly, the red flags, like Elena gave a lot of various red flags. So really asking why this particular product, why this sale, why this behavior from the fiduciary acting on behalf of the elder. So that potential abuse, I guess, and then the word too, potential, it's not been proven yet. So the whole idea of innocent until proven guilty, maybe. I'm not sure I quite understand the question from the commenter.
Okay. So I will say to the audience that if that was your question and it wasn't fully answered or didn't feel clear, please send us a follow-up and we'll try to get you more information. And so it seems like we are wrapping up with questions. So I'm going to go ahead and transition us over here with thank you, Kimberly and Elena, for those. Yep, we're going to wrap it up. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's program and share a few reminders for everyone. So just yet again, thank you, Kimberly and Elena, for your insightful presentations. We'd also like to thank our top sponsors at the Diamond level, Michael Stevens, Probate and Trust Realtor, and at the Platinum level, Campbell Green LLP, Trust and Estate Attorneys. Today's recording, PowerPoint presentation, and any other session materials will be available on the LAS website within the next week. If you need CEU credits, please look out for the post-event email in your inbox in the next 24 hours. We invite you to sign up for the rest of our webinar series by visiting the LAS website. Join us for our last session in the series on electronic wills in California on Tuesday, October 6th at 12 p.m. For any questions or comments about today's webinar or the program as a whole, you can email us at conference, CONFERENCE, at lashicap.org. That's conference@lashicap.org. Thank you again for joining us today, and we wish you a great rest of your week.